Welcome to P English Literature, a YouTube channel that conveys Amazon, Goodreads, blog, and video book reviews coupled with interviews with authors. It's a perfect channel for book lovers, authors, and writers generally. P English Literature, the exact channel for you and me. Hi there, viewers. Today I'm joining in conversation with Dan Morrow, the author of A Heartbeat in Danger. It's really a pleasure to have Mr. Dan featured on P English Literature. Hi there, Mr. Dan.
Hey, how you doing, Peter? I'll tell you what, it's great to be here. It's been a little while coming, but we finally got together. We finally get to talk to each other. I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to speak with you. Okay, Mr. Dan, without wasting much time, I'd love to move straight into the interview. And I want to ask you about A Heartbeat in Danger, because while I read through this book, it is quite very intriguing, and the sort of message that is communicated in it, it's something that I think that a lot of people really need to know. And I was going to ask you, what inspired this book? How do you come about writing A Heartbeat in Danger?
About 10 years ago, our daughter's best friend, who we've known since third grade, so she's a chosen daughter. She was facing the same situation, pregnant, boyfriend wasn't in the picture. I mean, her parents had been divorced for a long time, and I picked her up one night and was taking her to a friend's house, and she was in the car and she's just weeping. Where she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't feel like I've got any kind of support. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I I'm not her dad, so I can't really give a whole lot of good advice. I can help her as best I could, but that conversation kind of stuck with me for a while, and it kind of marinated in my mind that not only her, but I'm sure that there's thousands of examples we could use, people in that same situation where they
Yeah,
are completely broken. They just literally don't know what they're going to do because they have this huge situation going on and they're just not sure. So where the genesis of the idea came from was that conversation with her.
wow, that's great. That's really fascinating, and I'm really excited to know about that. That's very intriguing.
Said it stuck with me for like 10 years. No, the good part about that is I gotta give a shout out because she has three beautiful children, and we're
Wow,
privileged to be like her grandparents, and
wow,
they're just amazing kids.
wow, that sounds quite very, intriguing. There's also something I want to ask you about A Heartbeat in Danger, and that's, the protagonist, Stacey. While I read through the story of Stacey, it's quite very awesome. It is quite fascinating. And, the characterization of Stacey is something that is very exceptional. And I was going to ask you, could you tell us more about the story of Stacey? I don't know. Is the story of Stacey based on a real life story or it's a fictional story?
It was based on the conversation that I had with our chosen daughter, and then it kind of expounded on that. Now I thought of two different ways. Well, one way I thought if I could go with the book was very linear, where she would have the child, and then we go through her life as she raises it. And I thought, well, that's kind of awkward. It's kind of I don't know. It seemed a little bit more labor intensive, I guess you could say. So I thought of this idea where um, what if she was taken into the future? What if she could actually see what her daughter's life could be like? And this is the good, bad, and ugly, and horrible. Um, and what I found interesting throughout the book, and as I was writing it, what I found interesting was the fact that here's this girl. She's faced with this huge decision, and she has her own life that she wants to live, and she's got goals and dreams like everybody does. And then there's this situation where it's going to ruin everything. She's thinking at the same time, this is going to ruin everything, and I'm not going to get what I want over here. But as she watches her child go through these situations, she feels that instinct to go protect, hug her and tell her it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And I found that interesting myself, is the interplay with that of there's this conflict where she, like I said, she wants the college, wants the good paying job eventually. She wanted to get married, and that's not going to happen. But um, then like I said, then she sees her child and she's like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other world. There's this whole other aspect to this that I never expected. I think that was the
Wow.
shock and surprise to Stacey, that she didn't expect that. And
Wow.
it was kind of a pleasant surprise.
Wow. Wow. That's actually very great. Because when I actually read through the story of Stacy, I love the characterization and I love the different sort of, experience that she passed through. I particularly love the kind of conversation that existed between her and the being. And the conversation is very swift and quite, intriguing and asks some sort of good weight of information to convey.
And I think just to kind of expand a little bit for people who may not have read it, it's based, focusing on Stacey. She's pregnant. She's unexpectedly, and she has goals. She has, a desire to do great things with her life, like everybody does. But she's
Yeah.
taken into the future to see, there's good things about her daughter's life. There's, her daughter is a doctor, becomes a lawyer, owns a nonprofit organization. Then the bad side of that, she's homeless, she's in prison, and she sees all of these things playing out in front of her, and it's hitting her that, oh my God, what do I do about this? How do I process this? Because it's a lot to deal with. So yeah, that was the fascinating part. I loved writing it because it was like each chapter is a different story.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. There's another thing I find quite exceptional about A Heartbeat in Danger, and that's the fact that while I was reading through the book, it made me remember a sort of book that I previously reviewed titled Essays from Dysfunctional Families, that is authored by Cassie Bell and Dane K. Brett. In Essays from Dysfunctional Families, it depicts the sort of relationship and situation that surrounds people that are born into a family like dysfunction in nature. That means I'm talking about people that have one or two ugly situation or circumstances that surround their bed, either from the father or from the children or from the mother. And concerning the story of Stacy, Tori, adjacent in this book, because I know it's somewhat dysfunctional. The family seems a little bit dysfunctional. I was going to ask you, what impact do you think divorce or a broken home can have on a child? And I'd love you to expound on the importance of parenting in a child's life.
Yeah, I want to preface my comments by saying it this way, that there's exceptions to every rule. I think you can do everything right as a parent. You can raise them properly, teach them the proper way to live, and teach them the proper choices, or lead them to those choices. Still, at some point, are going to make their own decisions, and that could go wrong. You could also live in a situation where you're not at an advantage, let's say, and you have a lot of things stacked against you. But at the same time, you overcome those situations. You overcome the poverty, or whatever the situation may be. And
Yeah.
there's always exceptions to every rule. So it's not like you live in one place and you have to stay there. I think that's the biggest thing about it, is you don't have to stay there. Having said that, as far as parenting goes, this is a very tricky thing, because being a man of faith and a believer in the Bible and Jesus, the ideal situation, the ideal circumstances are obviously two parents in the home raising the kids together, and it's a joint effort, and that would be ideal because it's that support system every child needs. Again, with the prevalency of divorce and the prevalency of dysfunction, again, it comes down to decisions. And I myself have been through dysfunction in my family, and I had a decision whether to make of, I could live this way for the rest of my life. I could be a victim. I could wallow in the fact that oh, it's never going to get any better than this, or I can turn around. I can say, you know what, I don't want this for myself. I know that I'm better, and work
Yeah.
towards getting there. And that's the part about it, is it's the work that kind of gets in the way, I guess. You have a decision about, do you want to work your way out of it or just stay where you are? So
Yeah.
it's a very tricky, multi-layered type of situation, and everybody's got to make that decision for themselves. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but I think ideally, if you have that support, you have people that love you, if you have people you trust, people that build into your life and encourage you to do the right thing and are with you along the way, then I think you've got a great advantage, no matter what your circumstances are.
Yeah, that's actually true. Because most people that are actually born into a dysfunctional family often have some sort of notion that since they are born into a family that is dysfunctional, then it's like a passport for them to start going wayward, behaving anyhow. But I think if they could have the power to discern that, okay, since I'm born into a dysfunctional family, then I would try my possible best to change the situation. I'll try my possible best to make the best out of my life. And I think it's all about, the discerning power and the ability to know and realize that, okay, since this is the issue, I'm gonna, forfeit or not looking into the ugly circumstances surrounding my birth. I'm gonna be a better person.
Touch on that in the book, where at one point in the dream state, Stacey meets this person I call the being, and
Yeah.
they're going back and forth, and she's of the opinion that look, this is going to ruin my life, and if I carry this child, it's going to ruin everything.
Yeah.
And he looks at her and basically asks her, what about the examples to the contrary? What about all the people that have overcome the bad circumstances? What do you say about that? She's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. But there are so many examples. If you look for them, athletes are a prime example. I mean, my God, how many athletes do we hear about? They were homeless. They were from poverty neighborhoods,
Yeah.
and they overcame that. So, like I said, it's a multi-layered situation, but everybody has to make that choice for themselves of what are you going to do with the circumstances you're dealt, and how are you going to respond?
Yeah, I love your response to this. And I think it's all about psychology. I think it's all about, psychology. I love your answer. It's quite, absolutely fascinating. Okay, Mr. Dan, there's another thing I would love to ask you about a heartbeat in danger. And that's the part where in page 141 and page 142, whereby, Stacey was having a conversation with the being. And I think I recited this part at the beginning page of my video book review that I made for the book, whereby Stacy was like, whereby the being rather was like asking Stacy that, do you think any child is ever born by accident? And Stacy was like, yes. And the being was like, he was stunned. His fixed marks of surprise as he furrowed his brow and looked at her. Why do you say this? The conversation keep going, and the being was like, have you ever considered that that child might grow up to become a great world leader and bring peace to the nation? When I was reading through this particular segment, I underlined this particular part. I found that most of the sentence is absolutely profound in meaning and extremely deep. And I would love you to expand more on the subject.
What I I wrestled so hard on whether I should keep that in the book or not. I again, being a man of faith and so forth, and believing certain things that I do, um, I'm not as rigid as you might think about certain things. But anyway, I wrestled so hard because
Yeah.
talking about an extremely emotional situation. Not only, and the section you're referring to is they ask about, she mentions that, somebody, born out of wedlock or rape as a result of that.
Yeah.
And again, it's a very sensitive thing. And my intent was not to say and minimize what happens, because there's no reason, no excuse that any man on the planet should ever treat a woman with disrespect, excuses at all. And the being even says that you're right, should be treated that. But what I look at, and I try to live my life this way, life is going to hurt. Life is going to be difficult, and it's going to suck bad. But at the same time, if you dig underneath the dirt, you're going to find beauty. Just like when you're going for gold, you got to dig around in the dirt. You got to sift through that dirt. You're going to find the gold nuggets. You got to dig through the tunnels. You're going to find the silver, the diamonds. You got to dig for that stuff. It's not just going to be there. I mean, if you look around everywhere, there's going to be bad stuff. I mean, for God's sake, right now, what we're dealing with, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. And it's
Yeah.
easy to get into that and just think, oh, this is all horrible. It's never going to get better. But you got to dig. And that's the point I was trying to make in that section was, yeah, you know what? Let's not minimize the fact that this hurt and that this was wrong, because there's no excuse. Right? There's no making it better there. it happened. However, you can either choose to focus on the negative and live in that and wallow in that negativity, or you can look around and say, guess what? Something absolutely beautiful came out of this. And in this case, it's her looking at her daughter. I forget exactly what she was doing at this point, but
Yeah,
it was her daughter, and she was successful and she
yeah,
achieved certain. So it's easy to do that, but again, I understand it's a very sensitive subject, and I wrestled so hard about, do I want to include that? Do I want to keep that in there? Do I want to take it out? Maybe, rephrase it another way. But it's a harsh reality. And it's true, and it happens. And I don't mind going there, as it were, because I think it needs to be talked about. I think it needs to be confronted that here's
yeah.
this horrible thing that goes on, and yet something beautiful could come out of that if you look for it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's actually fascinating. I particularly love the conversation that exists between Stacey and the Bean, and I love the way they could emphasize what would become of Stacey's unborn baby's future. I particularly love the way the conversation move on and the switch and the plot twist, etc. I love the characterization. It's actually very, very wholesome, and I really need to commend you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It took a lot of work, and a lot of effort to try to sort through, what questions would the being ask, and what would be her response based on the fact of, here's what
Yeah.
I'm coming from. How would that interplay go? What would that sound like? So it took me a lot to wade through those questions and answers.
Yeah, sure, it's a great job, and you deserve your accolade for that. That's quite intriguing. Mr. Dan, another thing I'd like to ask you about He Heartbeat in Danger is, how long does it take you to finish this impressive fiction book? And what are the difficulties that you experience while writing this book?
You know, I'm not sure exactly how long it may have taken, and I say that only because, while I'm working a day job, when I had free time, I would focus on this book. So it might
Okay.
have been 6 months, 3 months, I don't know. Um,
Wow.
I'm one of those writers where if I get on a roll, if I really get that inspiration really percolating, it just kind of flows, and it
Yeah.
just goes out. I can't stop myself from writing. I was off work a few years back for about 3.5 months, and I was able to complete 4 manuscripts, not finished products like to put in a book form, but I was able to finish like 4 projects in that 3.5 month time. So it's one of those things. If I'm really focused on it, I can get it done quickly. This one, like I said, it probably took maybe 6 months total, and then I had to go back and tweak things and go back and look at, do I want to say it this way, or what's a better way to say that? What's a better way to ask this question? Maybe I could describe it differently here. So
That's noted.
that's what took the longer part was going backwards on all that.
Yeah, that's great. And that reminds me, while I read through your book, I discovered that the storytelling techniques is quite distinctive. I specifically love the way you write, your choice of words and everything is quite very fascinating. And I was going to ask you, I don't know if you take this particular trait, this particular feature to resemble a particular writer or an author. And if yes, I'd love to know the author and how the author's writing styles and flexures. I don't know if you understand my question, right? What I'm trying to say is that when I read through the book, I love your use of words. I love how distinctive your words and your sentences are. I love the way you write your words. I love the writing style and the crafting of each sentence is quite very wholesome. And I was going to ask you if you take this particular fictional character to resemble a particular writer or author, and if yes, I'd love to know the name of the author and how the author's writing style has influenced yours.
I'll tell you what, that's a very hard question for me to answer, only because there's not one specific author that I look
Yeah.
to as like a mentor, as it were, because I love to read. I mean, and I don't. This is going to sound funny, but I don't read as much as I should. That's embarrassing to say that, but I love reading, and I love the fact of finding a book and it's got a great plot. I love reading and going through it, and just kind of absorbing what they're doing, and maybe it's a subconscious thing that just kind of
Yeah.
all in, and let's try to emulate that. Let's try to put that out in my own style. I mean, John Grisham I like as well, because he's very direct. He's very forthright. He's very detailed in a lot of ways, um,
Yeah.
sometimes to a fault. But I like his style of writing. There's an older author back in the 70s, Alistair MacLean, who wrote some spy novels and so forth, and I loved his style of writing. But like I said, for me to say there's just one author that I emulate is very hard because, like I said, every book that I read, I'm learning something and I'm absorbing something different from each one. So it's basically a contribution of all of the authors I've read. So it's a nice way to do it, I think, because you take all these styles, mix it up, and find your own style.
That's great. You know, I've asked this particular question also from different authors, and no one has been able to say that, okay, this is a particular author that his writing style influenced me. They would always say that, I get this style from this person, I learned this from that person, I garnered it from this person, and I collate everything together and make my own out of it. So I think it's a very nice technique, and I'm really excited about hearing that from you
But
also.
I think also the thing is that I think through all of that, as you continue to write and just, whatever it may be, 5 lines, I'll sit down and I'll like, maybe go paragraphs on end, 5, 6 word document pages. And then sometimes I'll sit down, do like 3 lines, or I'll go back and rework a paragraph to death, and that's all. But I think through all of that repetition, I think what you do is eventually find your own way and you find your
Yeah,
own style of writing. And so you're not
exactly.
borrowing from somebody else. You're finding actually
Yeah.
what sounds good to you and what your voice is going to be. I'm still struggling to find, and I know eventually I'm going to get there. Just this repetition. But yeah, I think that's the goal of every author is to find their own voice and to you know themselves the best way they possibly can.
Yeah, that's great. Another question I'd like to ask you, Mr. Dan, is I don't know, can you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? That's firstly. And secondly, is that can you tell us, what are the difficulties that you've experienced in terms of marketing this book? And thirdly, what are the mediums you've utilized so far in terms of promoting a heartbeat in danger?
Just, when I first, this is actually my second book, and when I first looked at publishing my first book, I got online and I just looked at all the different ways to do it. Now, there's obviously the traditional way where find an
Yeah.
agent, they pitch it
Yeah.
to the big house, and they take over. There's also
Yeah.
the independent author where you're responsible for literally every step of the process. And you obviously have some
So,
people that can help you. Uh, you know, you have people that can proofread, edit, etc. There are different extremes there. There's something in the middle though that I discovered, um, where it's kind of, I call it a hybrid, where they do the heavy lifting of formatting the book, making the pages, putting it together, binding it together, making it an actual book. Obviously, you're
yeah.
paying them to do this. And there's good and bad about that because, obviously you have control over it. They're sending you the manuscript. You can make changes to it. In fact, this one I did. I went through
Yeah.
several times and, change this line, should read this way. And so there's that hybrid element of it as well. I guess what I would suggest to anybody, getting into it would just be research the options, find out what works best for you, find out what is is going to be beneficial to you. You mentioned marketing and promoting, and that's something I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah.
Finding ways to make people aware that my book is out there, because I
Yeah.
believe in the message. I believe that this is a situation where this book can help people who have been through it heal. They can find something in this book to heal. People who are going through it right now can find some hope that, yeah, there is, get some people together. And if I listen to the people I trust, then I can get through this. And there's hope to get through that situation. If there's people like myself that were on the outside and you're watching somebody you love go through this, there's help in those questions that are asked. That's why I had the Being and Stacey interact so much, because those
Yeah.
questions that he asks can be
Yeah.
something that somebody who is watching this can ask this person, and maybe there's that'll spur more conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah, that to me is uh, but the marketing and promotion part of it I'm struggling with. And again, there's a vast array of opportunities out there. And again, I'm still searching for that right can help me propel this forward. And something like this, like what you're doing here, even one little step, can help. So that's why, and I'm grateful for that. I really am. I can't tell you how grateful I am.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. You're really welcome. There's another thing I want to, ask you. Not really ask you, but if there's anything you want the viewers to know concerning your book, A Heartbeat in Danger, that I probably might not mention in my interview, you are free to, share with us and let the viewers know. If there's anything you just feel to let the viewers know concerning A Heartbeat in Danger that you love to share with them.
There was one scene in particular that
Okay.
I wrote, and this is towards the end of the book, and it takes place
Okay.
between Tori and Jason. Now these are the parents of Stacey, and they're divorced, and it was uh, not a very harmonious divorce. It's a very acrimonious situation.
Okay.
Came through a park outside the hospital, and they're having a gentle conversation, and they're reminiscing about when they started dating in college and the conversation that took place. That's not based on real experience, but
Yeah.
it's one of those situations where I took a, a, a relationship that I was involved in, and I speculated, if we had an opportunity to talk now, if we could, reminisce about some things and talk about it and hash through, what would that sound like? And
Yeah.
that's where that conversation came through. There's some things about it that, other books that I'm writing, there's parts of myself in the book,
Wow.
experiences that I've had that I try to put into the book. And it's kind of cathartic. I mean, it's bizarre. Don't want to make it about myself, but if it fits the situation, then I'm going to put it in there, and I'm going to find a way to kind of squeeze this in. That, what, I know this experience. I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like to be isolated. Stacey feels that way. She feels like, oh my God, I'm in this situation where nobody's going to understand. They're not going to grasp the concept and the weight of my decision here. And I felt that way as far as, like, growing up. I just felt isolated. It's just like closed off from the world, and it's a very lonely feeling. And that's why I said, I always say it this way: there's two sides to the argument here, and there's
Yeah.
yes and there's no, and they're screaming at everybody. And I think there's more people in the middle here that say, you know what, if I can just quiet down this noise, I could just get with people I trust, friends, family members, whatever. If I can get quiet with them and talk this through, I can figure this thing out for myself. I don't need these two extremes to what to do, you know? And I think that's what this book tries to do, is kind of cut through all of that noise and, shut down the arguments and just say, you know what, focus on yourself. Focus on people you trust, listen to them, advice. And you can do this, but it's going to take some effort. And
Yeah.
that's what I hope to do with this book. And that's why I think it's important that everybody, at least try to find it and give it to somebody. I had a gentleman order a book for himself and for his daughter, and they were going to read it together. So I thought that was pretty.
Yeah, pretty cool. That's really pretty cool. Yeah, so Mr. Dan, another thing I want to ask you, probably it's gonna be the last question in this interview, is that, when you write A Heartbeat Danger, it's quite very fascinating. And I was gonna ask you, what sort of advice do you have with other writers who are still struggling to producing a book like yours? What kind of advice would you give to writers who are still struggling to producing an impressive book like yours?
First thing I would say, don't give up. Now, I've gotten close. I've been struggling a lot of ways, emotions and so forth. Don't give up at all
Don't
under
give up.
any circumstance. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Secondly, um, do your research. Again, line to look for groups. I've joined several author groups on Facebook, and they have been very beneficial. Where you ask them a question, hey, what about this? What do you recommend here? They've been
Yeah.
very beneficial. So there's a lot of groups out there on Facebook that will encourage you and try to steer you in the right direction to make sure you are successful. Um,
Yeah.
and then just write every day. It doesn't matter whether you sit down and you pound out half a novel in one sitting. It doesn't matter. The goal is write something. I've sat down sometimes. I'll write in 2 lines. Done. I can't do anymore. That's it. That's all I have. And then there are other times I'll sit down, like I said, and I'll sit there and it'll just flow. So that's the main thing. But just don't give up. Quit on yourself. Find some
Yes.
people that are going to encourage you to do it. I've got some great people in my life who have
Wow.
told me, if you ever consider stop writing, kick your butt, you know? So that's the thing you need, is that encouragement. You need support, and you need to find a place that's gonna point you in direction that you want to go. And like I said, but the main thing is just don't give up. Keep
Yeah.
writing, keep going, keep moving forward. It may take some time. Well, my first book was published in 2019. This is my second book. Taking time to get to this level, you know? So it's going to take time. Just be patient with yourself
Yeah.
and focus on what your goal is. And
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
it sounds simple.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer. Thank you very much for your advice. I so much love it, and I hope that viewers will find it quite impressive and they would love to utilize it. So, viewers, here is A Heartbeat in Danger by Dan Morrow. We've just spoken to the author Dan Morrow, and this book is currently available for purchase on Amazon. I left a link in the description part of this interview if you would like to get a copy of the book on Amazon. It's quite fascinating. It's a nice fiction story, and it is absolutely amazing. I also left a link in the description part of this video to the video book review that I made for the book. It's a pleasure, as we've just spoken to the author, Dan Morrow. Thank you very much, Mr. Dan, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I really appreciate it.
Your opportunity here, and I love your work, and I think that you're doing a great thing for authors, and I just wish you well and continuing to do this and uplifting authors like myself. That's fantastic. That's a great service.